Does anybody
people...
who's not a white male really stand a chance of being a Republican?
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. I think that there is
this. They don't seem like they're open to that kind of diversity.
I'll be honest with you. I travel the country. I have not really experienced meaningful racism from grassroots conservative audiences for the last, several years that I've been, since I stepped down from my business career. That was a different world I was in. But for my book tours and everything else, and then now for this campaign, traveling the country, it's funny. That's the impression that you get from the media, meeting people from Iowa, Ohio, Michigan, New Hampshire. I don't see that at all. In fact, I just see a hunger for substance, ideas, what's actually going to make the country better. I actually am very encouraged by that.
I'm not rich, but I get off my ass every day to make sure I ain't broke. And that's the reality.
All right. So sometime last year when, Vivek Ramaswamy started his campaign for, to run for president, and then he ended up on the Breakfast Club during an interview, and Tezlyn Figaro was on there, and basically putting him to some sort of her own little test, which I don't think really was much of a test. It was more of her personal attacking, right? And anyway, so I went ahead and brought it back. So, yeah.
Now we have Tezlyn Figaro. I'm sure Tezlyn has some questions. Tez, you good?
Yes, I do. So I've heard a lot of, what you think and your vision, and I'm a very practical person, and I want to kind of, opposed to talking about your opponents, let's talk about you for a moment, and let's actually talk about your policy. Explain to me your position on this civic duty voting.
Sure. So my position is, I think that every kid who graduates from high school should know the minimums about the country that we require an immigrant to know about the country in order to become a citizen. So there's a test. My mom had to pass it. Every immigrant has to pass it to this country that asks you some basic questions. What are the three branches of government? What branch of government does the U.S. president lead? Some basic questions about what is the Bill of Rights. It's like a multiple choice exam, or some of them you write in. I think that if we're going to ask immigrants to pass that test, as we should, I think every 18-year-old who graduates from high school should have to pass that as well, because young people, it goes back to that issue of pride. You don't value a country that you don't know something about. You don't value something you inherit. You value something you have a stake in creating, in building, or knowing something about. So how do we think big about this? Well, young people, as I told you, most of them, very few of them vote. As it stands today, super small numbers. And apparently 60% of them say they would rather give up their right to vote than give up Tik-Tok. Well, I say, all right, let's take that to the next level. How about we do something that raises the voting age from 18 to 25, but you still get to vote at 18 if you just pass that same civics test that an immigrant has to pass in order to vote. And tests aren't for everybody, so be it. Then you at least serve in the military or a first responder role for 6 months. That's my civic duty voting proposal. Actually, the voting age only became 18 in 1971 in the context of the Vietnam draft. So I just think reviving those ideas is going to be good for us.
A lot. So let's prove your point. Nick, our camera guy, do you know the three branches of the federal government?
Over 24, so it don't matter.
But I'm just saying, but nobody knows there are 24. Red, do you know the three branches?
Executive.
Well, I got a test. I would like to see if you're willing to pass, because I believe in, just as you believe in civic engagement, I believe in changing the ideas of what political opponents look like, what they should look like, or political candidates. Are you willing to take a test with me quickly? Because I just have a couple of questions for you.
I will, absolutely. And the way this is opening up, I have a feeling I'm about to fail it, but that's good. Let's do it.
That's right, yeah. Just for clarity, I am an independent. I'm not a Democrat or a Republican. Cool. I think that's important for the premise of the argument, because I know you did a lot of debating at Harvard. I also want to make it clear that these are the same questions that I asked liberal Democrat Marianne Williamson. So I want to make sure that we put that out there as well, just to kind of set the foundation.
I'm open to being humbled. Let's do this.
Okay.
To be fair, it was only one question she asked. One question. The dumbest question ever, too. Because there was really no answer that would have made her happy.
Great. Let's go. So you mentioned, the pride of being an American and how important it is to have pride in this country. I'm also a veteran, by the way, for the United States Air Force.
Here we go. She's going to open up. She was a veteran of the United States Air Force. Okay. You're a female in the Air Force. Any veteran from any other branch would know. That don't mean shit. It doesn't mean shit. But she will still continue to say she's a veteran and da 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 da. And she's going to say the country she died for, or the country she signed up to die for. As a female in the Air Force.
So when is it that you voted for the first time?
I voted in 2020.
Okay, so you're how old again?
I'm 37 years old.
So for how many years you sat around and did not get involved at all in any civic engagement? Is that my understanding?
A long time is the answer. And actually, that's what I wrote this book about. I'm not holding myself out as some sort of model. I'm actually offering myself as a self-reflection of my journey as a citizen to whom this country has given much, right? As an adult, when you have kids, it changes your perspectives. I'm very honest about that. Absolutely.
Okay, no problem.
Now it's time for you to be honest, Tezlyn Figaro. What did you do in the Air Force? What was your MOS that you signed up to die for?
So let's go deeper into the self-reflection. So you've sat around for, and sir, I'm being as respectful as I possibly can. Please don't take anything
and you don't even
way.
have to be. And you don't even have to be. So take it off and let's go.
So you've been sitting around in the country that my ancestors built for about 20 years. Your parents came over as immigrants, brought you over. You made millions, according to your resume, off of this country. And you have absolutely not been involved in civics. One, not voting. And two, let me just ask, because I know you mentioned earlier, you don't want to sit around at the debate and talk about accomplishments. Let's make the accomplishments pretty simple. In high school, were you ever a class president or take any leadership role? Because your opponent did, Chris Christie. He was the class president. So have you ever taken any leadership at all on anything? Or just
can I just correct a couple factual things that are kind of important? My parents didn't bring me over to the country. I was born in this country, and I'm proud of that.
No, I know you were born here in Ohio.
Yeah.
Ohio.
You mentioned my parents.
I'm saying your
brought
parents were immigrants. My apologies.
That's all right. You said your parents brought you over to this country. I thought I would set that record straight.
I mean, they were immigrants, but let's not go down the water hole.
No, we're not going to water hole. I just want to correct a couple facts, and then
it's not a water hole. You cannot go down a water hole. It's a rabbit hole. You can go down a rabbit hole. Maybe not physically, but you're not going to go down a water hole.
The other thing is,
you were born here in Ohio.
I was born in Cincinnati, Ohio. That's right.
Right. So you've been here your entire life. So the question is, did you take any leadership role in middle school, high school, class president?
I did.
I know you played tennis. What is it? Explain it to us.
Student council. But I think that this is I have held leadership roles over my life, but those don't qualify me to do what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
You see what I mean by dumb question? Just because you're president of your student council or whatever in high school or ASB doesn't make you it doesn't make you qualified to be president of the United States. There's a lot of people I know that were part of ASB and student council and all that shit. And guess what? They're drug addicts now. They're alcoholics. I just don't understand, There's certain characteristics that would qualify you to be president of the United States, vice president of the United States. The will to want to do things for the United States of America. The will to want to make changes, right? Or in Biden's case, the will to just make a lot of money for your family and not do a damn thing, but let the country fall apart.
It kind of does. Okay, it kind of does. Well, I'm giving the test. I'm the test administrator.
All right, there you go.
So it kind of does, because when you go from saying I want to go to the highest office,
and I'll tell you, I've led companies as well. Is the other leader? Right, the main leadership role I've played is and I want to talk about one early part of your premise that I also want to say, to bring it to the country point. The other point, you use the word sitting around. I'm not somebody who's saying I want the next generation, my kids' generation, to have more civic duties when they graduate from high school and college than I did when I did. That being said, I wasn't sitting around. I've developed medicines, 5 of which are FDA-approved products today, one of which is a life-saving therapy in kids, 20 of whom die by the age of 3 if they're not treated, 70% of whom now live lives of a normal duration. Another one for prostate cancer. So I don't apologize for making contributions. But
right. Well, I don't want you to filibuster that
no worries.
Because
Just
that's not the question that I asked. And I don't consider, as a veteran, I'm talking about service. I'm not talking about what you
Civic
did for
service,
profit. I'm not talking about what you paid people to do with your company.
So
I'm not talking about
I've not served the country
because that
in the way
means
you
nothing
have.
to me.
You do
what I'm
realize
talking,
she
what
hasn't
I
been
am
able to ask a question. She's been trying to
Go
ask
for
a
it,
question,
yeah.
and you've been talking over her.
I'm
and
all ears.
We gave you the platform to let you say
Seems a
what
little
you said.
defensive.
I'm all ears. No, I was just correcting a couple
She hasn't had a chance
facts.
to
That's
ask a
all.
question yet. Every
Go
time
ahead,
she
Ted,
tries
ask
to
the
ask a question, you've been cutting her off. Go ahead, Ted.
I'm all ears.
Right. So your question. So my question again is: you're trying to your goal is to raise the standard, and you're saying you want people to believe in country, and you want people to have civic engagement. And sir, I just find it very telling that you haven't had any civic engagement at all, and haven't been at all. And when I say sit around, I don't mean you haven't done anything. I'm talking about in regards to service. Because one thing about political office, the same way that you want to change how people look at politics and look at this country, I want to change how people look at politicians. And when I see that someone hasn't did anything at all to be of service to mankind, to take a leadership role. It's not good enough to just be on city student council. Were you a leader? All of that applies. Have you been able to get anybody in the room at any time, from a high school gymnasium to Ohio, Republican leadership there to now? Have you been able to get anybody in a room to believe in this vision? I don't agree with a lot of your vision statement, but I do know you've been going around having these discussions and getting everybody emotionally worked up to talk about vision and debate. But I want to get to the practical. You're trying to go from preschool to president of the United States. You're skipping over city council, county council, mayor, governor. You want to go straight to the top. So my question is this a PR? Is this for the PR, the perception of reality? Or can you point to any leadership where you've been able to get people to believe in what you're talking about that they're not paid to do on any of these vision statements that you have? If not, then to me, it's a moot point, because you're holding a standard that you haven't met yourself.
You know, it's funny because President Trump was never any of those either. And guess how well he turned out? And yet Biden, Bernie Sanders, everyone else on the Democratic side, they've been in politics all their lives. And hell, even Mitch McConnell and I can't even remember any of the other older freaking Republicans. They've been doing the same shit, and guess what? They suck. So
if you're only going to count government service, you're absolutely
no, not government
right.
service.
Okay.
Student council in the 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th. Were you a leader? Did you do anything to rally anybody? Did you fight for better lunch? I did in the 6th grade with Miss Harris. I'm not talking about government. I can go all the way back from the 5th grade every year, sir, because people who are in service to this country, if you're going to go around saying you want people to believe in this country that I signed up to die for,
Your daddy, your mama, your brother, your sister, the dog, the cat, the fish was home when you left. You're right. And that's the reason you left. You're right. I left my home. I left my home to join the army. Join the army. I left my home. I left my home to join the army. Join the army. The day I left. The day I left. My mama cried. My mama cried. She thought that I would surely die. Would surely die. I left my wife. I left my wife standing at the door. Standing at the door. She knew that I would die at war. Would die at war.
then I want to make sure that you're holding that same standard. So not government, not political. Let's not get it confused. Yeah. I'm saying, have you did anything of service that we can point to say he is a good leader? Like Chris, and I'm not even a fan of Chris Christie, but he was the student council president in high school. So have you done anything of service besides yourself that has not benefited yourself? It's just a simple question. Let me give you an example because maybe you're confused. In the 6th grade, Miss Harris was snatching papers from everybody in the classroom. So me as a 10-year-old, I went to the principal and said, I'm tired of Miss Harris snatching papers. and I'll organize the students around getting Miss Harris to stop snatching papers. Now, there was a consequence for that. I got suspended for 5 days for talking back, and I got in trouble. I got a spanking, and I was on punishment for months and months. But that is a simple way of organizing people. So I want you to kind of boast about it the way you did the millions of dollars and said what you did with the pharmaceutical companies. What leadership can you point to that you've been able to rally anybody around anything that is of service that you did not pay anybody to do? I think that's important for the next president of the United States.
Sure.
I'm going to be honest about it with you.
Yep.
Leadership is not about self.
I agree with you on that.
What I just heard is that everything is about you. And to be honest with you, this is just a PR campaign, sir, to be honest with you. And I think you're trying to go further to the right because you want the Republicans to accept you as a man of color. And I think the only way you think you can do that is to be so extreme.
I appreciate your opinion.
With your positions. And I think you need to do a little bit more work in service. I'll give it back to you guys.
Let me ask, because she did ask me.
I think it's whack that you're proposing to revoke voting rights for 18 to 24-year-olds unless they meet certain qualifications, but you never exercised your rights.
Well,
for so long.
So most young people don't, is the whole point.
Well,
so, Charlamagne, let me ask you a question. Do you think
the largest voter turnouts have been over the last couple elections, few elections?
They still voted at a very low rate. But let me ask you a question. What do you think about high school students being required to pass the civics test? What's your perspective on that?
The one that you proposed?
The one that every immigrant has to pass in order to enter the country. If every high school student has to pass that before they graduate, what's your take on that?
I don't think there's anything wrong with it.
Okay, good. Now let me tell you something about the law as it exists today. Men in this country, not women, but men are required by law to register with the Selective Service, age 18 to 25. That's the draft. We don't have a draft, but men have to register. If you don't, they put you in prison. At least they can. It's a criminal offense if you don't. My view is I would decriminalize that. I don't like the government telling you what you can and cannot do. That's not the American way. But if you want to enjoy the civic privilege of voting, then I think it is perfectly legitimate to say you have to at least know something about the country or have served that country, one or the other. Absolutely.
Because this is important. We have to pause it. This is not a personal attack.
That's okay.
This is you, and I know that as a Republican, you are certainly not soft. So this is not a personal attack.
Yeah,
this
I'm
is
okay with
asking
attacks
about.
too.
This is about asking about your background and how it correlates, how it's relevant to saying you're going to serve this country because. President is actually.
So I have been an open book in the last 3 years.
Yeah, I know,
Absolutely.
and I'm going page by page.
And I'm saying that I have not.
I'm gonna let you finish.
Yep.
But I want to be clear. It's not an attack.
Okay.
Because you've been an open book, but that doesn't mean I have to like what's on the page.
That's fair
But
enough.
it's not an attack. I'm just reading the book.
Yep.
And so when I hear somebody say you need to get to either pass this test or do some type of service to the country, and I spend hours looking. You were in the Phi Beta Kappa. Did you have a leadership role in college, the honor roll? When somebody sets service as the standard and they've done no service except to themselves, that's a fair question. It's a question.
That's
and
a
you
fair
just
question.
So I've been on the, I mean, look, I was on I was on high school student council. Yes, absolutely.
Were you a lead? Were you a leader?
I was a vice president of my high school student council. Absolutely. I was the president of the National Honor Society. I can go down the list. It's just that
that's what I was asking you to do. Go down the list. But
so I was a president of the National Honor Society. I was the vice president of my student council. I was a lead amongst the volunteers at the hospital where I served growing up. I was actually a leader in volunteer research over the summers. From my senior year,
all of that, but you already admitted all of that was to get into college.
Not
but
all of
ahead.
it, but I am admitting it. I think that
I know that's self-service, though. I just do you understand the difference between self-service and service?
I think the reality is, and I think we just all have to be more honest. When many high school students are serving today, not all of them, but I think let's smoke it out. I don't like that structure where we actually mix service with self-interest.
And I don't like the structure of somebody saying somebody need to give service as a veteran. I don't like the structure of somebody going to the highest office of the land and have not served anybody at any time unless it was self-serving. So this is where we just have two different ideologies. And I know your goal was to come here and get into.
Here's my perspective.
I know. That's why we got different perspectives.
Remember, two guys, he got to leave in 5 minutes. I know.
Look, I don't care if a presidential candidate has ever served as, student council president or none of that shit, right? None of that shit really matters, right? There's so many people I know that have been, active in school and, student council and all this other stuff, captain of the cheer team, and then now they're drug addicts, alcoholics, you know what I mean? I used to work at Tennessee Elite Communities where it was a drug and alcohol rehab. I knew one, she was a student council vice president, and she had a bunch of cuts on her arm. She went crazy. I mean, none of that shit makes sense to me. That, part of leadership. I'm a veteran of the U.S. Air Force. As a female, really? You're really gonna tote the fact that you were an Air Force veteran as a female? And yet, what does that show? It doesn't show anything, right? Not to discredit females who are in the military, okay? Y'all know I'm a combat veteran. U.S. Army. I was a combat engineer. And in my unit at 814th, or when I was with 50th Engineer Company, we had females in our units, right? Combat engineer, but we were combat support. So we had females, and so I don't want to discredit females in combat. But when you're a female U.S. Air Force veteran, 9 times out of 10, you really didn't do shit. 9 times out of 10, when you say service to a country that you signed up to die for, I mean, you're in the Air Force. You didn't sign up to die for anything. If I could redo my military service, I probably would join the Air Force. Why? Because the life expectancy is probably a lot longer than when I was a combat engineer in the U.S. Army. Also, when I was in Iraq, I spent most of my time on the Air Force side because they had a miniature golf tent. They had all the best computers and, all the best movie theaters and so on and so forth. They had everything better than the rest of the military branches. I wouldn't join the Navy, even though I have a lot more Filipino friends over there. But, no, I wouldn't join the Navy because I don't want to be... I'm not a good swimmer, so... I'm also not a good runner, so it would have been perfect to join the Air Force. Look, my whole premise of creating this video is because she just kept toting on the fact that she's an Air Force veteran. Don't brag about that shit. Don't brag about being an Air Force veteran and making it seem like, I went hard for this country. No, you didn't. You went for the Air Force. The Chair Force. That's all. It's your boy King Churro. Thank you for watching. Remember that you're loved, and remember to be great every day because tomorrow is never promised. Oh, and by the way, I don't know if y'all know, but Vivek Ramaswamy, he dropped out of the race for president and went ahead and went wholeheartedly endorsing Donald Trump. So, peace out, y'all.
Every day you wake up, you got a decision to make. To go right or left, up or down, right or wrong. At the end of the day, you make the decision. Nobody forces you. So make the right decision. Make moves, set the goal. Stop making excuses, man. And if it look like a duck, walk like a duck, and sound like a duck, it's a duck. Stop guessing. Just do the right thing. You heard? You hear me? I love y'all. Stay positive. Love one another.
All right.
So you're in the infantry?
Well, they send me my update information.
What's your rank in the infantry?
06.
You're an 06? Colonel.
Yes, sir.
Okay. That's what I'm talking about.
They want me to get there, so to do my update on my pay. So,
okay.
But I don't have any money to get there.
You're 06 and you don't have any money.
That's why I wanted to come here to make a loan.
So you come into a recruiting station to make a
loan to get to the active duty base, if possible.
You understand how silly that sounds, right? So you think that sounds perfectly logical?
Well, they
don't have
like a bus voucher or airplane voucher, travel voucher.
What, like put the
travel?
Well, you know you're out of uniform, right?
What happened?
I know you said
you have any rank around? Some extra rank?
I left my home. I left my home to join the army. Join the army. I left my home. I left surely die, would surely die. I left my wife, standing at the door, She knew that I would die.